Okay, good evening, everyone.
大家晚上好。
Thank you so much for coming to all of these classes.
谢谢大家参加了所有的课程。
Lama Sonam and John and I were just talking about this, and we would love to have more classes, but I think we have to finish tonight.
我刚才正跟 Lama Sonam 还有 John 我们正在说呢，说我们这个课程应该还有更多节课才行。但是我们必须今天晚上结束了。
It's been really wonderful to meet all of you and to share with all of you the teachings that we've received about Lojong.
能跟大家在这儿见面，然后一起来学习我们领受到的修心的教法，我感到非常的高兴。
So this evening is class number 8.
所以今天晚上是第8次课程。
We will hopefully conclude the basic reading in the book, The Great Path of Awakening by Jamgon Kongtrul.
我是希望呢，今天能够完成Jamgon Kongtrul的《觉醒大道》这一部著作的讲解。
But this is by no means the end of the course for us.
但是这呢，对我们来说呢，绝对不是一个课程的结束。
Lojong is a practice, hopefully, that we will do for the rest of our lives.
在修心呢，它是我们应该就是终生来修持的。
After all, in the book, the text says that without the practice of bodhicitta, there is no Buddhahood.
那我们教典中说呢，没有菩提心就没有佛果。
And being able to practice the compassion meditation practice Tong-Len every day helps to strengthen our bodhicitta now and into the future.
那来修持这个大悲心的自他交换法呢，能够增强我们的菩提心，来就是帮助我们未来的修持。
At the end of today's class, I will show you a daily Lojong practice that you can do every day.
在今天课程结束的时候呢，我会给大家就是指导一个就是每天你都可以做的修行法。
But before that, we need to start the class, and we'll start the class with our usual prayers.
那我们现在就开始上课。首先呢，是像往常一样来念诵我们的祈请文。
Okay. Okay. The first prayer will be the prayer for the Mahamudra lineage supplication.
首先，我们来念诵大手印传承祈请文。
Thinking of the presence of all the great masters, we take refuge in them and we engender the bodhicitta heart.
观想所有的传承上师，在我们的面前，我们向他们祈请并发菩提心。
But we'll begin with the Kaju lineage supplication.
我们首先呢是以这个祈请噶举传承上师开始。
Toje chan chen te lo narodang marpa mi la chuje kampo pa dusum she ja kun ken karma pa che shi chun je ju pa tsinada drita tsao sum pa len dru pa so sablam cha ja che lang ha nye pe Nyame drogunda po kajula Soadep so kaju lamanam. Je patin no nam tar chin ji lo. Shen lo kong ki ka par sun par shin. Se nor kun la cha shen he pa dang. Say do ta che be kong chen la. Ne kurjen pa me par chin ji lo. Mugu gong gi go war sun pa jen. Menga ter go je pe la la. Jundu so wa de pe gong chen la. Chu mi mu gu ke wa chin ji lo. Yang me gong gi ngu zhi sun pa jen. Gan shar to pe ngo wo cho so ma de. Ma chu de ka jo pe gong chen la. Gom ja lo dan ra wa chin ji lo. Nam tok ngo wo chu kur sun pa jen. Chi yam ha yin chi yang char wa la. Ma ga ro pa char we kong chen la. Hor de yer me to par chin ji lo. Ke wa kun tu yan da la ma dang. Drao me chu ki pa la lon chu ching. Sa da lang hi yen ten rap so ne. Dorje chang gi go pan yor to shok. Dorje chang gi go pan yor to shok. Okay, next we'll recite the refuge and bodhicitta prayers. We'll recite them twice in Tibetan and then once in our own language.
下面我们诵皈依发心祭文，2遍藏文，1遍我们自己的语言。
Or Sanjay Chudang Tsoji Chonam La Chang Chu Bardu Dani Kyap Suche Daji Jin Soji Be Sunam Ki Drola Pinshu Sanjay Drupar Sho Sanjay Chudam Soji Chonam La Jang Chu Bardu Dani Kyap Suche Daji Jin Soji Be Sunam Ki Drola Pinshu Sanjay Drupar Sho. To the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until awakening. Through the merit of my performance of generosity and so forth, may I accomplish Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. Next, we'll recite the Four Immeasurables prayer, reciting it 2 times in Tibetan and then once in our own language.
下面我们诵四无量心2遍藏文，1遍自己的语言。
Or semchen tamche dewa tan te we gyu tan tempar gyu chik dunga tan dunga gi ju tan trawar ju chik dunga me pe tewa tampa tam hindrawar ju chik nerin chan tan yi dan drawe tom yen chen pola nepa ju chik. Semchen tamche dewa tan dewe gyu tan tempar gyu chik dunga tan dunga gi ju tan trawar ju chik dunga me pe dewa dampa tam hindrawar ju chik nerin chan tan yi dan drawe tong yen chen pola nepa ju chik. May all beings gain happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all beings experience great joy, free from suffering. May all beings come to rest in the great equanimity, having the same great love for all. Okay. As you know, we've been for the last 7 weeks working on the practice of the 7-point mind training.
正如大家知道的，我们过去7个星期以来呢，我们都在学习这个修行7要。
We've talked about the history of the practice, how the teachings on bodhicitta came from the Buddha Shakyamuni and were elucidated in the 8th century by Shantideva. And then the teachings on the mind training were written down after, the teachings on the mind training were brought to Tibet by the great Saint Atisha.
我们讲过了，就是从释迦牟尼佛开始教导的，我们来修持菩提心，然后直到公元8世纪的时候，有寂天菩萨呢，来开始了自他交换的修法，然后这个教法呢，又由阿底峡尊者呢带到了西藏。
We also talked about how this text came to be written, that it was written by Geshe Chakara Yeshe Dorje, and that it consists of 59 mind training slogans.
那我们也讲了说，这个修心的法要呢，是由格西千阿瓦呢他写下来总结成为修心7要的，然后一共包含59句修心警句。
The 59 slogans are short teachings that are progressive, that teach us the 7 points of mind training.
那这59句这个修心偈颂呢，就是逐步的一步一步的来教导我们修心的方法。
But as we have seen, these slogans, although very brief, are a little difficult to understand without further explanation.
我们也看到了这59句偈呢，非常的简要简短，如果不经过讲解呢，是很难了解的。
Therefore, the great masters of the modern day have relied upon explanations from Jamgon Kongtrul the Great in his book, The Great Path of Awakening, which explains the meaning of all 59 mind training slogans.
所以现在的修行人呢，大部分呢是依赖于蒋公康楚19世纪他所写的《觉醒大道》这一部对于这个修行7要他的一个释论。
We've also talked about what brings us to this teaching.
我们也讲到了，是什么呢？来引导我们要来学习这些教法呢？
We've learned about how suffering brings us to the teachings of the Dharma to learn about suffering, its cause, its solution, and the path.
我们讲到了，正是痛苦呢，引导我们来寻求佛法，来寻求苦，它的苦的原因、灭苦的方法以及灭苦的道路。
the Buddha's teachings say that self-clinging and self-fixation is a strong cause of suffering for us.
我说呢，我执呢，就是造成那个强烈的痛苦的一个强大的原因。
And that if we can find a way to let go of self-clinging and self-fixation, we will let go of the strongest cause of our suffering.
如果我们能够放下自私这个的自我的执着呢，我们就能够去除痛苦的原因。
However, since beginningless time, we have had a sense of self and have experienced strong clinging to it.
但是呢，从无始以来呢，我们就执着于一个有我，并且有这个一个对于此呢有一个强烈的执着。
So how do we let go of selfishness? Through the practices of bodhicitta, or the mind of awakening.
那我们怎么样来舍弃这个自我的执着呢？那就是要通过菩提心，或者也叫做解脱，就是觉悟心的修持。
Relative bodhicitta is love and compassion, which helps to dissolve the barriers between ourselves and others.
相对菩提心呢，也就是爱心和慈心的修持呢，它能够去掉我们跟他人之间的一个界限。
And the practices of ultimate bodhicitta help us to understand the nature of mind, wisdom, and emptiness.
而圣意菩提心的修持呢，能够帮助我们了悟智慧和空性，也就是最终的心性。
These are powerful methods for helping us to break through self-clinging.
这些呢，就是非常有力的方法呢，让我们来突破自我执着。
Lojong, or mind training, teaches us the methods for practicing relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta.
修心法要呢，它就是来教导我们如何的修持相对菩提心和圣意菩提心的。
So the main practice that we have learned to in Lojong practice is the practice of Tong-Len, or sending and receiving.
我们在修心法要中主要学到的呢，就是自他交换法。
And we have used the practice methods taught by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche for doing the Tong-Len practice as part of our everyday practice.
我们学习了堪布开达仁波切他教导的自他交换的这个修法呢，来作为我们的日课。
If you remember, he taught us in his book the Dharma paths how to practice Tong-Len.
如果你还记得的话，仁波切在他的法道这一部著作中曾经讲到，我们应该如何来修持自他交换法。
I know it's been a while since we've practiced together, so I thought it would be nice for our last class to do a little bit of Tong-Len together.
就是从我们讲到这个方法到现在已经又过了一段时间了，所以我想呢，我们应该呢，在这堂课上呢，亲自的呢来这个实修一下。
I think you will remember the technique, but I can review it with you.
我想大家都还记得这个方法，但是我可以跟大家复习一下。
Let's see. Okay, here we go. Just briefly, the practice, these are the key points for the simplified Tong-Len practice from Rinpoche's book.
这个是从仁波切的著作叫《法道》上面节要节选的，就是这个就是修持的重点。
We've already done the first part, which is taking refuge in engendering bodhicitta.
我们已经完成了这个第一部分了，就是念诵皈依和发菩提心的寄诵。
Next, we can do some practice of shamatha.
第二部分呢是要来修一点止。
Then we'll visualize sentient beings arrayed before us, and with our out breath, we will send goodness to all of them.
然后呢，接下来我们就要观想所有的众生在我们的面前，这样随着我们的呼吸呢，我们就把我们所有的善德呢，施给他们。
And we will see sentient beings benefited by these.
而且我们呢看到呢众生呢，受到了他的利益。
Then as we breathe in, we will think we remove the suffering from sentient beings.
当我们吸的时候呢，我们要观想呢，我们把所有众生的痛苦呢都取收了，
And we will see the beings relieved of their suffering.
并且呢看到众生呢真实的他们的痛苦呢得到了解除。
And if you remember from Rinpoche's instruction, he says that as the suffering enters you, it meets your bodhicitta motivation, dissolves into nothing, and disappears.
那仁波切在他的书中说呢，就是当这个痛苦它一旦就你所取受的所有的这些痛苦一旦进入到你之后呢，它就跟你的菩提心相遇了，然后呢这个痛苦呢就完全的化为乌有而消失了。
And then after meditating like this for a while, you can let go of the focus and let your mind rest in a place beyond subject and object.
那这样禅修一小会儿时间呢，这时候呢就让自己的心呢，放下心所缘的一切呢，让心呢住在远离这个能所二种对境的状态中。
And we complete the practice by dedicating merit.
然后呢，最后以这个回向来作为修法的结束。
So now we'll do a little bit of this practice together.
那我们现在呢，就是一起来共修一下这个。
Since we have started with the taking of refuge and the engendering of bodhicitta, we'll start with a little bit of quiet shamatha practice.
因为我们已经完成了皈依发心的部分，我们现在就来做一段止的修持。
Sitting quietly, we become aware of our breath coming in and going out, and we remain aware of the breath as it comes in and goes out.
我们安静的坐好，然后关注到自己的呼吸，注意到自己的在一呼一吸。
So we'll sit quietly for just a moment.
我们短暂的坐一下。
When we start the Tong-Len practice, we can close our eyes and use our imagination.
当我们开始做自他交换的修法的时候呢，可以闭上眼睛，然后运用自己的想象力。
We can imagine that in front of us are all of the sentient beings of all of the realms of existence.
我们可以想象观想所有的众生，我们周围呢是所有的众生。
Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said once that because the visualization is our imagination, we can actually conceive of and think of all sentient beings as really being present in front of us.
看来仁波切曾经说过，因为我们这里运用的是我们的想象力，所以呢，我们就可以想象了所有的众生无余的都在我们的面前。
He says you're meditating with your mind, and with your mind you can imagine anything.
他说呢，你禅修呢，就是修的是自己的心，而心呢是可以就是做任何的想象。
So imagining that all sentient beings are in front of us, as we breathe out, we think that we give them all, every single one of them, our happiness and our goodness.
那我们想观想所有的众生都在我们的眼前，然后呢，我们为他们的每一位，然后送出我们所有的善德和快乐。
Just as when the sun comes up over the horizon, it spills out in light everywhere, so our love and goodness flow out to all beings.
正像太阳升起来的时候，光芒照遍了宇宙一样，那我们的爱和善德呢，也像这个日光一样呢，照耀在每一位众生身上。
With the in-breath, we imagine that we remove from all of these sentient beings all of their suffering and difficulty.
当吸气的时候，我们观想我们取收了所有这些众生他们所有的苦难和困难。
We take all of this imaginary suffering and remove it from them and feel that they are relieved of it.
我们把这观想的痛苦呢，从他们取走，然后呢，他们就完全的得到了解脱。
And when the suffering comes to us, it meets our bodhisattva motivation and it dissolves into nothing and disappears.
当这个痛苦呢回到我们身内的时候呢，就跟我们的菩提心相遇，而在一瞬间呢就化为无有，完全的消失。
So now we'll meditate for just a short while, breathing out and giving goodness to beings, removing on the out breath, removing suffering on the in breath, seeing it dissolve into nothing and disappear.
我们就这样呢来做一段修持，呼出的时候呢，观想将所有的善德送给所有的众生；吸的时候呢，取收他们所有的痛苦，然后呢又化为乌有。
Having meditated for a short time, we let go of the visualization and allow our mind to come to rest.
这样禅修一段时间以后呢，我们就让我们的心呢放下我们的观想，然后让心来放松安住。
We attempt to let go of the visualization and attempt to allow our mind to rest quietly all by itself.
我们呢，让我们的心呢能放下我们的。让我们的心放下我们的观想，能够让它安住。
And we conclude the practice by thinking that we dedicate the merit of this practice to all suffering beings and their freedom and liberation from samsara.
结束的时候呢，我们就把所有的功德呢回向给所有受苦的众生，愿他们呢能够离苦，得到最终的解脱。
Okay. Thank you for doing a short practice of Tong-Len with us this evening.
谢谢大家，今天晚上我们一起修了自他交换法。
I'd like to move into the main topic of this evening, which is the 7th of the 7 points of mind training.
下面我们就要来接着讲修行7要中的第7要。
Okay. Okay, there we go. It takes a moment to find the class. There we go. Now we're set. So we were last time we were talking about the 7th point of mind training, which is about how to keep your mind training practice strong and prevent it from weakening.
我们上一次讲到呢，如何来保持自己修心的强度呢，来避免它减弱。
We stopped at the slogan, "Don't make mistakes."
那我们上次讲到这一句偈颂，就是不颠倒是非。
In the explanation of this in the book, The Great Path of Awakening, Jamgon Kongtrul explains about mistaken practices, or I'm sorry, mistakes we can make in our practice.
在jamgon Kongtrul的觉醒大道中呢，对此做了解释，就是他讲解了我们修持中会出现的一些错误。
In fact, he tells us about 6 different mistakes.
他告诉了我们有6种主要的错误。
He says to endure patiently the suffering of subduing your enemies and protecting your friends and working to make money, and not to endure patiently the difficulties of Dharma practice is mistaken patience.
那他说呢，就是如果你能够忍耐呢，来去做各种就是降服他敌人来就是利益自己，或者呢是利益自己的亲人，或者呢是就是能够忍耐种种这个为了赚钱等等而受到的种种的苦难，但是呢你却忍受不了修法的艰苦，那么这是一个错误的忍耐。
To desire wealth, happiness, and comfort in this life and have no interest in practicing Dharma thoroughly, it's called mistaken inclination or mistaken intention.
想要第二呢，就是说你想要追求此生的欲乐，但是呢却对于深入的修法不感兴趣，那么这个就叫做错误的发心。
To enjoy the taste of wealth and possessions and not to enjoy the taste of hearing, contemplating, and meditating is mistaken enjoyment.
喜欢各种财富财宝等等，但是呢却不对于文字修不生欢喜心，那么这就是一个错误的欢喜。
To feel compassion for a person who has hardships in practicing the Dharma, but not have compassion for a person who does evil is mistaken compassion.
那对于修法遇到困难的 修行人感觉到很可怜，就是很有慈悲心，但是却对于作恶的众生呢没有任何慈悲心，那么这是一个错误的慈悲心。
To engage people who benefit from you, such as people who work for you and so on, if to engage people who look to you for their livelihood, but not to engage them in Dharma is mistaken care.
你对于自己照顾的人呢，就是只是让他们去做一些利己的事情，但是呢，却不帮助他们来安住在法道上，那么这是一个错误的关照。
This doesn't mean you should preach Dharma to your employees.
这并不是指说你需要向你雇佣的人，就是只是让他们来为你服务，来做工做世间的事情，但是却不来关怀他们这个修法的事情。这个并不是说你应该对你的雇员来这个讲法等等。
This means that you should be a good example to others and take good care of them spiritually.
他的意思是说呢，你应该作为别人的，应该作为他们的榜样，而应该从精神世界上呢来关怀他们。
And the last of the 6 mistakes is, let's see, how do I say this? Let's see, to take joy in other people's suffering, like the suffering of your enemies, to take joy in the suffering of your enemies and not to take joy in virtue, and virtue is mistaken joy.
那就是最后一个呢，就是你对于自己的敌人，就是他的痛苦而感到这个随喜欢喜，但是呢，对于那个就是Lama is the not for joy for the enemy and not the joy for Dharma.
Yeah, it's basically if you take joy in other people's suffering, but you don't take joy in Dharma, that's a mistake.
就是你对于他人的痛苦呢，就是没有感到欢喜，没有随喜，但是呢，就是你感到你对他人的痛苦感到欢喜，但是对于法呢却不生这个欢喜心，那么这是一个错误的随喜心。
The theme that connects all of these is that if we take joy in worldly things, but don't take joy in Dharma things, that's a mistake.
那么这个6种错误的，它主要的说的呢，就是我们我们的关注的点呢，都是在世俗的事情上，但是呢，我们却不关注佛法，那么这就是一个错误。
One of the features of the 7th point of mind training is that it asks us to look at ourselves honestly and admit our hidden faults.
那修行7要主要来让我们做的其中之一，这就是让我们来诚实的审查自己的内心，来发现自己的过失。
Sometimes us Dharma people, those of us who are Dharma people, we think that we're doing really good Dharma, but we're actually being a little bit too worldly.
作为修行者来说，有的时候呢，我们认为我们修得很好，但是实际上呢，我们的那个关注的重点呢，还是在世俗上。
I think that for those of us who are practicing as householders, the easiest of these 6 mistakes to make is being patient with all of our worldly work, but not being patient with our Dharma practice.
我想作为在家居士，我们很容易犯的一个错误，就是说，对于我们世间的一切所作所为呢，都具有很大的安忍心，但是呢，对于这个修法呢，却缺少安忍。
But let's keep moving into the next slogan.
我们接下来讲下一句偈。
We've got about 6 more to go.
还有6句。
The next slogan is don't fluctuate.
下一句偈呢是不时作时修。
And this is about people who sometimes practice the Dharma, but sometimes don't.
这说的是有些人呢，他有时候修，有时候不修法。
He starts with a pretty harsh assessment.
这个一开始呢，他做了一个就很严厉的论述。
Jamgon Kongtrul is famous for straight talk.
蒋公康说呢，他是就是以非常这个直言而闻名的。
He says a person who sometimes practices and sometimes doesn't has not developed a definite understanding of Dharma.
他说呢，那些时修时不修的人呢，实际上呢，对法呢，并没有真正的了解。
I remember one of my teachers saying that if a person practices sometimes but doesn't practice sometimes, they haven't really understood the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma.
那就是我就是有朋友说过，就是所有这些有时候修有时候不修的人，他们真的应该来学习这个转心四法。
If we understand the precious human birth, impermanence, karma, and the defects of samsara, if we understand these 4 things, we'll be motivated to practice.
如果我们真正的了解了人生难得，无常迅速，业果不虚和这个轮回的过患的话，我们一定会就是升起这个修法的动力。
So in order to keep our bodhicitta strong, we shouldn't switch our practice off and on.
所以为了维持我们菩提心足够的强，它的程度足够的强呢，我们就不应该就是断断续续的来修。
The 54th slogan is encourages us to train wholeheartedly.
那下面这一句呢，就是教我们呢要，这54句他要教我们呢，就是应该全心全意的来修，坚定的来修。
Jamgon Kongtrul says, without indulging any distraction, train yourself only in mind training, being completely involved with this one concern.
张公康处说呢，你要放下所有的这个散逸的心，而专心致志的、完全的投入到修心法要来，以修心法要就是为你唯一的关注点。
Remember, the 7th point gives us advice about how to keep our bodhicitta strong.
要记住我们的修行七要呢，它现在告诉我们呢是如何来保持我们的菩提心，它的是一个强的程度。
The authors of this text don't want us to ever give up.
那这个本书的作者呢，就是鼓励我们呢永远不要放弃。
This 55th slogan might be a little confusing. Find freedom through both examination and investigation.
那这个第55句呢，可能有一点费解，它是说以2种观察来找到自由。
Basically, the explanation is that we should occasionally test ourselves to see how patient we really are.
那他说的是说，我们应该偶尔时常的呢，就是时时呢来检视一下我们到底真正的有我们的安忍心到底有多少。
We shouldn't just think, oh, I'm practicing Tong-Len, my patience is good.
我们不能只是简单的说，哦，我现在在修自他交换呢，那我的忍辱心应该是很好的。
This is what examination and investigation are about.
那这就是这里所说的要来检视，要来观察。
Jamgon Kongtrul says when you're sitting on your meditation seat, you should turn your attention from time to time to an object that upsets your mind.
张公康主说呢，当你在坐垫上禅修持的时候呢，那你时时的呢都要把心呢转向一个让你难过的一个对境。
It could be a person who has insulted you or made you mad.
可能是有人曾经侮辱过你的一个人，就是让你很生气的。
Or a situation that's made you very sad.
或者呢是就是一件让你感到特别难过的事情。
He said, turn your mind to this object and see if it upsets your mind and it brings up negative mental afflictions in you.
他说呢，你要试着把心呢再转到这些让你难过的事情上呢，来看一下，他们是不是还是能让你的心呢升起负面的情绪。
He says if it upsets your mind and you become angry or upset, he said you should use your remedies, your Tong-Len, right then and there on that negative mental affliction.
那如果他们就扰乱了你的心，让你感到难过或者生气的时候呢，你马上就要把你正在修的这个自他交换法呢，就是立刻用来做对治。
If you remember, the slogan is that the slogans tell us when we're feeling angry, we should imagine that we take on the anger of all beings everywhere and think that our anger is contains the anger of all beings everywhere.
大家记得我们前面讲的修心偈颂中说到，当我们感到这个嗔心升起的时候呢，我们就要想，我们这个嗔心呢，它包含了所有众生的所有的这些嗔，都包含在我们的现在的这个生气的里面了。
So as part of this exercise, when we turn our attention to an object that makes us angry, we would then use Tong-Len as a remedy for our anger.
所以我们在做这个练习的时候呢，就是当我们这个对这些对境升起这个烦恼，比如升起嗔心的时候呢，我们就要立刻呢用这个自他交换呢来对治。
In this way, we should test ourselves over and over again.
以这样的方式呢，我们就要不断的实时的来检测一下自己。
If our anger is easily remedied, well, then we should try thinking about something that brings up our attachment.
那如果就是这个我们的嗔心是很容易对治的，那这时候呢，我们就要试着来看一下我们的贪心。
And in this way, we should test ourselves and see how our patience and our mind training are going.
这样呢，我们就能够来检视一下自己呢，到底我们的安忍和我们的修心，它进展的如何。
The next slogan is don't make a fuss.
下一个偈颂呢是不好大喜功，或者说这个不小题大做。
What this means is don't make a big deal out of your practice of Lojong.
它意思就是呢，不要把你在做的这个修心法呢，就是你做的这个修心的修持呢，就是小题大做。
Don't brag about what a great practitioner you are.
不要吹牛自己有修的多好。
He says there's all of the practice you do benefits you, so there's no need for you to talk about that to others.
他说呢，你所修的一切呢，所有的修持呢，都会利益到你的，你没有必要就是向别人来述说这些。
There's a quotation in the text that might be a little confusing.
下面呢就是有一句引用，可能会让大家感到困惑。
Jamgon Kongtrul talks about the monastic handbook or the councils of Ratreng Monastery.
Ratreng?
Yeah, Ratreng, R-A-T-R-E-N-G. Ratreng.
Ratreng. 那jamgon Kongtrul这里说的呢，是一个就是在 Ratreng 这个寺院的一个就是僧众的，它叫一个手册。
Apparently he's quoting from a handbook for monastics.
他是这里引用了这个僧众手册里面的一句话。
The advice goes like this. It says, don't expect much of people.
那他这个谏言呢，就是说不要对他人抱有太大的期待。
Instead, pray to your Yidam deity.
相反的，你应该向你的本尊祈请。
What this means is that we waste a lot of time as human beings expecting other people to do things we like.
他的意思就是说，我们作为一个人呢，我们是经常 浪费了很多的时间呢，就是期待着别人做自己喜欢的事情。
I remember one of my teachers saying that we forget that we wake up every day in samsara and nobody's perfect.
那我记得我的一位老师说过呢，我们忘记了，我们一睁眼早晨起来就是在这个轮回中，没有在轮回中呢，那是没有一个完人的，没有人是完人。
As one of my teachers said, what did we expect? We're in samsara. It's called the ocean of suffering.
那我的老师说呢，我们还期待什么呢？我们正在这个轮回的苦海之中啊。
And yet we frequently expect everything to go our way and everyone to agree with us.
我们还是就是盲目的认为，就在期待呢，就是所有的事情呢都能按照我们喜欢的方式进行，所有的人呢都能跟我们就是合得来，都能按我们的方式来做行为。
This advice is reminding us to have a sense of humor about our own silly expectations.
那这个谏言呢，就是说对于我们这种愚痴的这个愚蠢的这样的一个期待呢，就是要有一点幽默感。
Instead of expecting a lot out of other people, we should always remember to do our prayers and our meditation as a remedy to our impatience.
那与其说是不断的在期待对别人抱持着期待呢，不如呢我们就要不断的去做祈请来作为我们的对峙。
The practice of a yidam deity is something that that many people may not be familiar with.
对于居于本尊的修持呢，可能很多人还不熟悉。
The word yi means the mind.
在这个藏文这个本尊 idam 这个意呢，它指的就是心。
And dam means a bond.
dam 呢，这是第二个藏音节呢 dam 呢，就是说心的一个约束。
We bind our mind to the practice of a particular deity and a particular mantra.
我们把心呢，就是约束在呢修持某一位本尊和他的咒语上。
And we try to remember the deity and the mantra always.
我们试着呢，恒常的都能够意念本尊和他的咒语。
Through binding our mind to the deity and its practice, we increase our own inner qualities and purify our negativity.
通过呢，将心呢与这个本尊的修持相结合，就是把它约束在本尊的修持上呢，我们就能够发展内心的功德，而克服、消除内在的过失。
For those of us who are Lojong practitioners, Lojong is like our yidam practice. We should be thinking of it all the time.
那对于我们修心的行者来说呢，这个修心法要呢，它就是我们的本尊，我们应该呢，就是时时的，就是恒时的都想，就是他应该把它呢恒时的都放在我们的心里。
So the advice he's giving is instead of expecting a lot of people, you should just do your practice.
那对我给我们的建言呢，就说你与其说是不断的保持着对他人的期望呢，你不如呢，就是你更应该呢是来做自己的修持。
Not only should we not boast about our practice, we shouldn't waste time being caught up in irritation toward other people.
我们不但不能够对自己的修持呢做夸大或者是吹牛等等，我们更不应该呢就是浪费时间呢在对于别人的就是这个嗔怒或者是受到别人的刺激的这个上面。
I've had several people tell me that this can happen to them.
有好几位法友跟我说呢，这个是在他们身上会发生的事情。
We'll be sitting and they say they'll be sitting and practicing really well, and then they get up from their meditation seat and go talk to their family members, and then they immediately get impatient and angry.
他们本来是要下决心好好的在座上修持的，但是刚坐下不久又起来去跟自己的家人去说话，那说完话以后马上就变得很生气， 失去了自己的安忍了。
And so we have to do our best to recognize this problem and try to correct it.
所以我们呢要尽力的就是了知，就是了解、觉知到这个问题呢，然后来做改正。
The Jamgon Kongtrul says, because all of us, although we are Dharma people, have not made Dharma a remedy for our ego clinging, we are overly sensitive.
讲公看主说呢，就是虽然我们是所谓的修行人，但是我们的这个法呢，却没有用来对治自己的我执，所以呢，我们是非常的易怒，就是非常的敏感的。
He said, we're more sensitive than a newly healed wound.
他说呢，就是比这个刚长好的这个伤口还要敏感。
You know how that is. You get a paper cut, and then the next thing you know, you just keep bumping that finger.
你应该了解这个感受吧？就这个伤口，你比如说被一个纸划伤之后，你就总是感觉到这个伤口被碰到了。
So it's not just that kind of problem. He even says that we're even more caught up in irritation than Sang-Sen, which is a local spirit who has a bad reputation as being impatient. Sang-Sen, yeah.
Sang-Sen.
Tsangtsen, Sang-Sen.
Sang-Sen. 他说这我们甚至呢比那个就是著名的就是臭脾气、脾气特别坏的一个这个魔吧，这个鬼叫苍这个鬼的脾气呢还要坏。
Jamgon Kongtrul simply says this is not effective dharma.
那jamgon kongtrul说呢，这可不是就是有效的修持。
He says dharma to be effective must remedy ego fixation.
那有效的修法是什么呢？它是一定能够对治我们的我执的。
So after telling us all of these great practices we should be doing, he's just reminding us not to lose our attention and our mindfulness when we get up from our practice.
那他在这里呢，就是说我们已经学到了这么多，就是圣妙的这个修法之后呢，讲公康主在这里提醒我们呢，就是我们在这个在我们的修持中呢，不要忘失我们的正念。
He's asking us to be aware of our thoughts and take responsibility for our own mind.
他在这里呢，要求我们呢，对自己的这个念头呢，要有觉知力，要为自己的心呢来负责。
The 36th practice of the 37 practices of a bodhisattva comes to mind right now.
现在呢，就是我正好呢，就是这个佛子行37颂中的第36个修行呢，第36，就现在我正好想起来。
The verse goes like this: wherever you are and whatever you do, always be aware of the state of your mind.
他正好说的是呢，无论何时行何事，应观自心之相状。
Practicing mindfulness over and over again is the practice of a bodhisattva.
恒修这个恒常这个恒记正念与正知，这个是承办利他是佛子行。
We have 2 more slogans.
然后我们现在还有2句。
The first one is a warning. Don't be temperamental.
第一句呢，它是一个警告，说不要喜怒无常。
Jamgon Kongtrul simply explains this by saying, don't trouble the minds of your companions by showing your pleasure and displeasure over every little thing.
他说呢，不要就是以你这个喜欢不喜欢的一切这些大大小小的事情呢，来去打扰你的同伴。
This is a real problem for me because I tend to get excited about things I like and things I dislike.
这对我来说是一个问题，因为我对于自己喜欢的和不喜欢的呢，经常就是觉得很激动。
But I have to recognize that this advice is good because it'll help keep my mind on an even footing.
但是呢，我必须认识到这个寄送呢，它是正确的，因为呢，它能够让我的心呢和时常的保持平衡。
The final slogan is don't expect thanks.
最后一句呢是说不要追求感谢感和声誉。
Jamgon Kongtrul says, don't hope that others will express their gratitude by thanking you for your Dharma practice.
不要期待呢别人会对你所做的修持呢来表达感谢。
Don't expect them to thank you for helping others or for practicing virtue.
不要期待呢你在帮助别人和做善事的时候呢，期待着别人的感谢。
He says, in summary, get rid of any expectation of fame or prestige from your practice.
他作为总结呢，他说呢，放弃你所有对于就是你的修持的来获得名声和信誉的这个期待。
And so he summarizes by saying all of these points of advice will help you strengthen mind training and prevent it from weakening.
那就是他就说呢，所有的这些教言呢，都能够增强你的修心呢，训练而防止它减弱。
And then he quotes Muchul Togme. Muchul Togme is the author of the 37 practices of a bodhisattva. He quotes him by saying, throughout all of our lives, we should train well in the two kinds of bodhicitta.
他引用这个37颂的这个Muchul Togme他的话呢，就说是 Lama, can you repeat it again? Sorry.
Yes, throughout all our lives, we should train well in the two kinds of bodhicitta.
他说呢，我们生世我们所有生世间呢，都应该呢善修两种菩提心。
Using both meditation and post-meditation practices.
就是要在座上和座下。
And we should acquire the confidence of proficiency.
我们呢，应该就是由这个熟练呢而升起信心。
This confidence is something that develops over time.
那么这个信心呢，它是就是要假以时日的。
Many people, when they start their Lojong practice, do so because they feel their emotions are running out of control.
那很多这个在修心的人呢，他们是因为觉得自己的情绪就是很难控制自己的情绪。
And by learning the Tong-Len practice and the Lojong practice, they can begin to get a hold of their emotions and begin to work with them.
那通过修这个修行法要和自他交换法呢，他们慢慢的能够来掌控自己的情绪呢，能够来就是来对治它。
One person even told me that the first time that they used the object, the 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue slogan, the first time they used it and it actually worked, they were so excited.
有一个法友呢，曾经告诉我说呢，当他第一次使用这个3净、3毒、3善根这个寄送，当他第一次应用，而且真的成功的时候呢，他感到非常的兴奋。
One gentleman told me that when he was able to say, may my anger contain the anger of all beings, and by my working through this anger, may all of us be free of anger. He said it was like he felt free.
那有一位男士告诉我说呢，当他就是能够来做这样的观想，说所有众生的这个嗔恨心呢，都包含在自己的这个嗔心中，然后通过自己来对治嗔心呢，令所有的众生呢都能够从嗔心中解脱。那个时候他感到呢非常的就是自由。
He had always felt helpless in the face of his anger, and now he had something else to do, another way of working with it.
那他一直以来呢，就对于自己的嗔心呢，都是很束手无策的。然后呢，他这一次呢，就说他第一次呢，有了一种方法呢，就说他可以，就是在这个对于这个嗔心，可以就是用另外一个角度来对峙。
It was very empowering for him.
那对他来讲呢，这是一种很强有力的这个，就叫做像灌顶一样。
He felt like he was no longer out of control.
他觉得呢自己不再是这个失控的状态了。
And so it takes a long time for us to unlearn our habits of negative mental afflictions. It takes a long time.
所以呢，其实真正的来解除我们就是这个深重的习气和我们的这个烦恼呢，它是需要花时间的。
But if we even make a little bit of progress in this lifetime with our mental afflictions, it is it helps us to build our confidence that we can practice Dharma.
但是呢，哪怕我们今生呢，哪怕只是取得了一点，就是在于对治我们的烦恼上取得一点点小小的进步呢，也能够增强我们的信心，去未来修行的信心。
But there's a little bit more of the book to go. We should cover the final verses too.
那这个书呢，还有更多的一点内容，我们要来讲一下最后的一些教言。
The author of the book of the slogans, the author of the slogans, Chikawa Yeshe Dorje, concludes by saying, this quintessential elixir of instruction, which changes the 5 kinds of degeneration into the way or the path of awakening, is a transmission or a teaching from Serlingpa.
那这个修行七要的作者千冈瓦呢，也许多见呢，他说呢，说这个窍诀甘露啊，它能够把5种退失、退败而转为觉醒之道，它是来自于荆州大师的。
You might wonder, what are the 5 kinds of degeneration?
你可能会好奇说，什么叫做这种5种退败或者5种过失呢？
One of the teachings of the Dharma is that the times we live in are always times of degeneration.
那这个就是这个五种退，刚才说的实际上就是指的是五浊的意思，也就是我们现在所就是生活的这个时代。
The times are degenerating and sentient beings are degenerating.
那我们的这个时代呢，是在就是越来越不好，就叫做在那这个期间的那个众生呢，也在退转。
Life is degenerating, emotions are degenerating.
我们的生命呢变得越来越不好，我们的情绪呢也变得越来越恶劣。
And even the outlook of beings is degenerating.
那甚至连这个有情众生，它的外观呢也在堕落，就是变坏。
You often hear people say that things are getting worse in the world.
你经常会听到人说，现在世界变得越来越不好了。
But Jamgon Kongtrul says we don't have to be so worried about the 5 kinds of degeneration if we can practice mind training.
占公看出在这里说呢，说如果我们能够来修心的话呢，我们就不需要来担心这个污浊。
He says, while other remedies and other teachings may not be effective, Lojong is very effective. In fact, it's more effective when bad things are happening.
他说呢，也许其他的修法不再有效的时候呢，这个修心的法药呢，却会非常的有效，特别是当这些很多的恶事发生的时候。
He says, in fact, as things get worse around us, our practice of Dharma, love and compassion increases, just like a fire increases when wood is piled onto it.
他是说呢，相反的，如果就是在我们周遭发生了很多这个非善的事情的时候呢，我们的慈心和悲心呢也会就相应的增长，它就像是在这个熊熊的火里面添了更多的木头一样。
He calls it an essential elixir.
他把这些教言呢称作是一个甘露的宝藏。
Like an essential medicine that's very strong, these practices of taking on the suffering of others, it's a very strong medicine for counteracting ego fixation.
正像一个这个良药一样啊，这个来自它交换呢，就是对治我们我执的一个良药。
It teaches us how to use absolutely everything in our life to practice Dharma.
它教导我们呢，是利用我们生命中的所有的生活中的所有的事情，来修持佛法。
And this particular teaching came from the kindest of Atisha's gurus, Serlingpa of Indonesia.
那这一部教法呢，是传自阿底峡尊者他最慈悲的一位上师，叫做金州大师。
And the final verses are: the awakening of the karmic energy of previous training aroused intense interest in me. Therefore, I ignored suffering and criticism and sought instruction for subduing ego clinging. And now, when I die, I will regret nothing.
下面就是结行的结语啊，然后他说呢，由于往昔的修持的这个业力的觉醒呢，我呢对于佛法呢升起了强烈的兴趣，所以因此呢，我能够就是忽视痛苦和能够克服痛苦和他人的机会，而来寻求降服我执的教言。现在呢，就是我死了也没有任何遗憾。
The author of the slogans, Chikawa Yeshe Dorje, met this teaching, and the minute he met the teachings of Lojong, the karmic energy of his previous lives made him really intensely interested in learning more about Lojong.
那这个作者切堪瓦耶谢多杰呢，他在就是一旦遇到这个修行教法的这个当下呢，他过去修持的这个修持的这个业力呢就觉醒了，他就对这个修行的教法升起了强烈的兴趣。
But he had to go through some hardships to get this teaching, and he went through all of that just to get it, so he could get this instruction for subduing ego clinging.
他为了得到这些教法呢，真是忍受了很多的痛苦和挑战，他都能够安忍，然后呢，最终呢寻获了这个能够降服我执的这些教言。
It says here, let's see. He says, now when I die, I will regret nothing. And this means that he actually achieved awakening through this practice.
他说呢，现在就算我死了，我也不会后悔，有任何的遗憾了。他这个含义呢，就是说他通过修持这些教法呢，获得了觉醒。
So he has actually accomplished the goal of our human life, which is awakening. So he has nothing to regret.
他承办了就是我们作为人生的这个目的，终极的目的就是获得解脱，他也没有什么遗憾的。
Jamgon Kongtrul, after the 59 slogans are that he has presented, after this teaching on the 59 slogans, he adds a second section to the back of the book where he adds some additional verses that Serlingpa taught.
那蒋公康楚呢，他在这一部著作《觉醒大道》中呢，又加了在这之后呢，讲完59句寄送之后，有加了第二部分呢，有就是更多的来自金州大师的教言。
This second section is some additional instructions that will help you if you are practicing on your own.
那这个第二部分呢，就是来自这个修行传承它的额外的教导呢，这些深深的教言是当你在自修的时候会有帮助的。
Sometimes when we don't have our teachers around, we can feel a little bit lost.
有的时候我们上师不在身边的时候，我们会有感觉到有一些迷失。
Those of you who are familiar with the story of Milarepa, remember that before he went on retreat, his teacher Marpa gave him a small scroll of teachings to use in case of an emergency.
大家可能有人知道，就是密勒日巴当他去做闭关修持的时候呢，他的上师马尔巴呢给了他一卷这个信啊，就是一卷纸呢，就是说你到这个必要的时候再打开看。
I like to think of these teachings as our little bit of emergency dharma.
我就是更把这些教言呢，把它当做呢，就是我们来应急的一些教言。
The first piece of advice is that when your practice of the Dharma stirs up your evil karma from previous lifetimes, your mind might also get stirred up.
那首先呢，这个建议就是说，当你在修持甚深法要的时候呢，它这个甚深的这个修持呢，会搅动你的恶业，你的心也会被搅动。
You should respond by remembering your gratitude for your life and your gratitude for your practice of Dharma.
你这个时候呢，就要以这个对你自己的生命、对你自己的修持感恩的心，记得要以感恩的心来应对。
And then use Tong-Len and take on the suffering of yourself and others.
利用自他交换法呢，来承担自他的痛苦。
And then he gave a series of teachings on enlightening remedies, remedies for really disruptive emotions, corrections, and teachings that would summarize all of the remedies of Lojong.
那下面呢，又给出了就是更多的这个教言呢，一系列的教言呢，就是说呢是有包括4种觉悟的对峙，还有4种真正破坏性情绪的对峙，还有4种对于其他对峙法的一个校正，还有呢对于对峙法的这个2种教导的一个综述。
Unfortunately, because of time, we don't have time to read all of these wonderful verses.
对，就是因为时间限制呢，我们没有办法，就是把所有的这些偈颂呢都讲一下。
But I think really the summary is that when negative things are happening, if we can recognize that this is part of our karma and take on the sufferings of others, this is a good remedy.
那最重要的就是这个总结来说呢，就是最好的对治法呢，就是当我们在痛苦的当下呢，就要了知的它是来自于我们业力的。
For example, he says sometimes when there are bad omens, you worry about what's happening and you worry about what you should do.
他说呢，就是有的时候当有一些我们看到一些恶兆，这时候不知道该怎么做的时候。
This is a very human problem. We do tend to worry.
那就是我们会担心的时候，这是我们这个人类的共通的问题啊，就是我们习惯于担心。
But he's telling us here in his advice to do our best to recognize that this is the fruition of karma and that it's good that it's come up.
他说呢，这时候我们要尽力呢，就是来了解呢，他这个所有的这些事情呢，它都是一个这个恶业力的果报，而他现在这个果报已经发生了呢，这其实是一件好事情。
It's hard sometimes to accept negative things that happen as part of our karma, but if we can do that and then take on the sufferings of others, we can use even bad things that happen to us as a way of practicing Dharma, purifying karma, and increasing our love.
那如果我们呢能够就是把这些所有的这些负面的事情都当做是我们的业力呢，虽然这不太容易，但是如果我们能够这样做，并且呢来承担自他的痛苦的时候呢，如果我们能够这样做的时候，我们就能够呢把所有这些负面的事情呢来也转化成为法道，然后呢来清净我们的业障，增加我们的善德。
Then at the very end, he gives one final remedy.
那最后呢，他给出我们一个终极的对治。
He says, turn error right around and look right in. Relax completely and rest comfortably. Not being held, they will go freely.
那他说呢，就是当这个错误的，在这个错事的这个当下呢，要回头，向内直观，全然放松，舒坦安住，因为没有被执持，那么这些错误呢，他们将自由的离开。
This last remedy has to do with ultimate bodhicitta.
那么这个最终的对治法呢，是与圣意菩提心相关的。
He says, if you follow any thought or emotion that comes to you and let your mind wander outward, you're making a mistake.
他说呢，如果你追逐着心里升起的情绪和妄念呢，让你的心呢向外直持的时候呢，这是一个错误。
Instead, you should turn your attention right in and look right at your mind.
相反呢，你应该把注意力呢向内来直观自心。
When you look at your mind, you don't see a color or a shape or anything at all.
当你观自心的时候呢，你是找不到颜色、形状等等的。
When you don't see anything, you just relax your mind completely.
当你找不到任何事的时候，这时候呢就全然的安住。
He says, no matter how many thoughts or emotions we have or there are, when we don't hold them, they go freely on their own and become the accumulation of pristine wisdom.
他说呢，无论有多少的妄念和情绪，当我们不支持他们的时候呢，他们将会自然离开，而成为本净智慧资粮的积累。
When we recognize that our self-fixation has been engaged, when we find that we are hooked by circumstances, that's a way of saying, pay attention.
当我们认知到我们的这个我执呢，它就是被拴在这个外境上的时候呢，这就是这个在警告我们要注意了。
I'm not sure whether this came up in one of the earlier classes or not, but Pema Chodron often speaks of this being hooked.
我不知道我在之前的课程中是不是有提到过，这个就是被勾住了，因为 Pema Chodron 呢，他经常用这个被勾住了这个词。
The Tibetan word for this is Shenpa, S-H-E-N-P-A, Shenpa.
藏文呢，这个词意思是 Shenpa。
We can tell when our ego fixation is activated because we feel negatively.
我们可以呢，就是了知自己的这个我执呢，就是正被搅动起来了，就是从我们感受到这个负面的情绪上，我们就可以了知我们这个我执是被搅动了。
Our mind is peaceful one moment and not peaceful the next.
我们的心呢，时而安静安详呢，时而又不安详。
And so we actually know when our self-fixation is being activated.
所以呢，其实我们是知道呢，什么时候我们的心呢是这个我执呢是被激发了。
If we can notice this and look back at the mind and see that there's nothing there, that is a way of practicing the ultimate truth.
那如果我们呢注意到这个状态，然后马上呢能够回视内心呢，而这时候检视呢，发现其实什么都找不到的时候呢，这我们就是在修持最究竟的真理。
But if we do this and it doesn't, I'm sorry, if we do this and our negative mental affliction doesn't dissolve, then we really need to practice Tong-Len.
如果是我们在做这样的修持的时候呢，发现我们这个负面的情绪并不能自然的消散，那这时候呢，我们就需要来做自他交换。
And then use that negative mental affliction to take on the suffering of all beings.
我们来利用自己的这个负面的情绪呢，来承担所有众生的痛苦。
So now you might be wondering, what do you do now?
那大家可能现在会有一个问题说，接下来我们该怎么做呢？
The class is over, but the practice isn't.
虽然课程结束了，但是修持呢却没有结束。
Lojong is a complete system toward purifying negativity and accumulating merit.
修心呢，它是来去消除这个业障，消除这个恶业和增长善德的一个完整的体系。
You can practice it every day.
你可以每天来修。
It goes together with any other practice, whether you're doing nundro or mantra practice or anything.
它可以与任何其他的修法来结合，比如说无论你是做四加行，你是持咒等等，都可以结合修行法要来修。
You never outgrow it.
它从来不会过时的。
This practice will be with you forever.
它会一直与你相伴的。
Because the Buddha said that bodhicitta is the path to awakening, and this practice gives us the means to benefit beings now and in the future.
因为佛说呢，菩提心是引领我们走向觉悟的道路，菩提心为我们提供了现在和未来立生的方便。
I want to advise everyone, by the way, that we are going to run approximately 5 to 10 minutes over, and I'm sorry.
我现在就是可能我们要拖5到10分钟课了，对不起。
But I want you to know that that Lojong will be with you and with you always, and that this practice is something you can do until you reach Buddhahood.
那我想告诉大家的就是，这个修心的法要呢，它会一直陪伴着你，一直到你成佛。
I hope that you're able to continue doing Lojong practice and Tong-Len practice every day.
我希望大家呢能够每天呢坚持来做修行法要和自他交换法。
I'm just noticing there were 59 slides. That's a funny coincidence.
我正好发现我的这个课件一共有59张这个
Oh, that's funny. But I see there are a few questions, and I will try to take care of them.
我看到有几个问题，我们来回答一下。
Someone is asking, would you be able to lead a weekly or monthly Tong-Len Zoom session?
有人问呢，说你能不能就是带一个就是每月或者每周的一个自他交换的共修？
I think there's some benefit to having some continuing get together.
我想这个能继续的，大家还能一起来共修呢，是会有利益的。
I'm wondering if maybe meeting once a month for maybe 3 months might be a good idea.
我在想呢，是不是1个月就是我们来共修一次，或者3个月一次？
That way we can work on problems and questions that can come up in people's practice.
这样呢，我们可以来一起来就是解决就是我们可能在修持中遇到的问题和
I'll talk with my friends and see if it's possible or not.
那我会跟我的朋友商量一下呢，看这是不是可以的。
I can't promise because there's several people involved in this, so I have to talk with everyone and see what they think.
我不敢保证呢，是因为要在 Zoom 上，这个是要涉及到好几个就是工作人员的，我要来请问一下。
But I do appreciate you asking about that.
感谢你提问了这样的问题。
Let's see. I'm going to read this next one. When relieving people of suffering in Tong-Len, should we be imagining the people being something like a homeless person getting a home, or should we be sending them the relief of wisdom and imagine all beings realizing liberation? Okay.
他问的问题是说，当我们在观想这个自他交换的时候，观想解除众生的痛苦的时候，是应该想象呢这些众生呢，就是像这个无家可归的人得到了这个家一样的给予他们这个救护呢？还是说我们应该想呢，他们呢，实际上呢是给予了他们智慧，然后让他们最终获得了解脱
？This question is actually very perceptive.
这个问题呢，它是非常 perceptive。
Yeah, perceptive. It's a good question.
这个是一个很好的问题，就是很有见地。
It recognizes that there are two truths, the relative truth and the ultimate truth.
它所涉及的呢，是我们就是对于两种真理，一个是世俗谛和圣义谛的理解。
It also talks about the two kinds of benefits, the relative benefit of comfort and happiness, and the ultimate benefit of wisdom and enlightenment.
他也讲到了一个就是暂时的给予众生的一个利益和最终究竟的这个获得正觉悟的这个利益。
I don't think it's necessary for us to choose one or the other. We could give them both.
我想呢，我们不需要在这两者中间做抉择，我们可以把两者都送给他们。
I like the image in Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's description of sunlight spilling out over the horizon at dawn.
那我特别喜欢堪布仁波切举的这个例子呢，就像早晨这个太阳从地平线上升起来一样。
He says it brings beings whatever they need.
他说呢，他带给众生他们所需要的一切。
For some people, that might be comfort in a home.
对有些人来说，可能就是一个家。
For other people, it could be the relief from mental affliction.
对有些人来说呢，就是解除内心的烦恼。
But of course, ultimately, we are hoping they attain Buddhahood.
当然，在究竟上呢，我们是祈愿他们能够获得佛果的。
So I think it's fine to wish all of that for every being that this goodness touches.
所以呢，当这个善德碰触到所有众生的时候呢，这些所有的这些善事，他们想要的都是可以观想的。
Thanks again for this question.
谢谢这个问题。
Someone is asking for me to repeat the four thoughts that turn the mind toward Dharma, and I can definitely do that.
这个有法友呢，请喇嘛请再重复一下转心四思维。
These are the four thoughts that cause us to turn away from worldly life and turn toward the Dharma.
这四种思维呢，是让我们把心呢从世俗转向佛法的。
The first one is the preciousness of our human life.
第一个思维呢，就是我们的人生难得。
If we think about it, we could have been born anywhere.
如果我们想一下的话，其实我们可以生在任何的地方。
In any kind of form.
以任何的形式。
And maybe even in lower realms of existence.
甚至是在恶道里。
But we were born human in this lifetime, and even though we have had a lot of problems in our life, we're still alive.
我们有幸的此生呢生而为人，虽然我们还是有很多的问题，但是我们活着就很幸运。
We still have our faculties and we still have our mind.
我们还具足我们的这个五六根，我们还有我们的心。
We still have the capacity to learn and study and practice the Dharma.
我们还有学习和修持佛法的能力。
And in that way, our life is very precious.
对于从这些方面来说呢，我们的生命是非常宝贵的。
That is the first of the four thoughts.
这是转心的第一个思维。
The second of the four thoughts is about impermanence.
第二个思维是关于无常的。
Even though we're very fortunate to have this precious human life, it won't last forever.
虽然我们获得了这样宝贵的人生呢，但是它是不会永远存在的。
And we need to reflect on it so we don't waste our time.
我们需要思考这一点，不要再浪费自己的时间。
I remember one of my teachers saying that in the monastery in the morning, a monk or a nun goes through the hallway ringing the bell to wake everyone up.
我记得我的老师说过呢，在一个寺院里面呢，僧人在很早晨的时候呢，他要穿过一个走道，去敲钟来叫醒所有的人。
While they're ringing the bell, they're reciting a traditional verse.
当他们这个敲钟的时候呢，他们会诵一个传统的偈颂。
One of the things they're saying is, this could be the last day of your life. Practice well.
那他们说的可能就是会说，其中就会说，时日已过，请这个善加修持。
Don't waste your time, but work toward awakening.
不要再浪费时间了，要为了这个觉醒正悟而修持。
Some people think that Buddhists think too much about death, but sometimes I think we don't think enough about it.
有些人说呢，我们这个佛教徒呢，对于这个就想的太多了。但是我实际上觉得呢，是我们想的不够多。
Being able to reflect on this is good for us to help us not waste our time.
能够这样思维呢，就能够帮助我们呢，尽量的就是减少我们浪费时间。
The third of the four thoughts that turn the mind is reflecting on karma, action, cause and result.
第三个转型的思维呢，就是要来思维因果业报。
This means that we reflect on the fact that everything we think and do and say is changing our personality and our karma moment by moment.
这就是要意识到呢，我们所思所做所说的一切呢，它都在为我们积累我们的业力，来改善着我们的人格，改变着我们的人格。
And by recognizing this, it should give us a little moment of fright.
认知到这一点呢，我们应该就是有这么一瞬间的感到害怕。
We should be a little bit afraid of our negative karma and yearning after positive karma.
我们对于这个恶业呢，应该就是多少是有些恐惧的，应该呢来对于善业呢要有一个好要的心。
If we think about it, everything we think, do, and say is changing us continuously, either for the better or for the worse.
那我们就要了知呢，就是我们所说所做的一切呢，它都在时时刻刻的随时改变着我们，或者呢让我们变好，或者让我们变坏。
So we have to make a promise to ourselves that we'll do more good karma and less bad karma.
所以我们要保证呢，向自己保证呢，一定要去做更多的善业，积累更多的善业，而减少恶业。
The fourth of the four thoughts is the defects of samsara.
第四个思维呢，就是这个轮回的过患。
By reflecting on the fact that there is suffering in every part of samsara, by reflecting on the suffering and the defects of samsara, we're inspired to try to gain liberation from it.
我们要思维呢，就是轮回呢，它的方方面面，它在每一个层面上呢，都是苦和这个过患的。这样思维呢，能够帮助我们呢升起解脱之心。
Okay, let's see. I see we're running short on time. Someone is asked to repeat the 6 mistakes. The list of the 6 mistakes.
有法友呢想适当再说一下那个刚才我们讲的6种错误。
I'm not sure we have time to do all of that, but it is in Jamgon Kongtrul's text.
我不太确定，我们还有可能是没有时间再做了，但是呢，这个在讲公康处的书里面有。
I could copy it from the book and put it into chat if you like.
那么呢，他可以从这个书上把这个书上的文字拷贝下来，放在聊天栏里。
Meanwhile, someone has asked for my email address, and I've put that into chat.
还有法友呢问我的 email 地址，我已经放在这个交流栏里面。
Okay, guys, you're not going to believe this, but that is exactly the page I have up, the page on the 6 mistakes. So here it comes. I actually had that exact page open. So I'm putting it into chat.
它正好呢，就是这本书正好打开呢，就是这个6种错误。然后他现在把这一段拷贝在这聊天栏里了，这6种错误。
I'm grateful to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for putting it right on my desktop.
感谢三宝放在我的这个手提电脑上。
Okay, so we have to stop here for tonight.
我们今天不得不在这里结束了。
It's been a real joy to make the acquaintance of all of you and to be part of learning about this book together.
能够在这里结识大家，并且一起来学习这本书呢，对我来说是真正的非常的欢喜。
I hope that this will inform your practice and inspire you to learn more about Lojong and to make it part of your daily practice.
我希望呢，这个能够对你的修持有所激励呢，能够激发你呢，更多的来更深入的学习修心的教法，而且呢，能够成为你的日修。
My aspiration for all of us is that we continue to grow in our practice and learn how to help ourselves and other beings.
我对于我们所有人的祈愿呢，就是希望我们在法道上呢，继续的不断的前进呢，进步呢，能够更好的来利益自他。
I think about that sometimes. I'm not an enlightened being, but I have to share what little bit I know, and it's a very strange feeling.
有的时候呢，我在想呢，我自己不是一个觉者，但是呢，要把我自己知道的这些，还是要跟大家来做一个分享。有的时候感觉有一点奇怪。
I think back to asking Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche if I could teach this book, and he said, "Well, yes, of course."
我想起来，我当时问仁波切，我可以讲这本书吗？仁波切说当然可以。
But I don't think I'll ever stop studying this book.
但是呢，我想我永远不会停下学习这部书。
And I feel his blessing is with all of us as we attempt and try to practice these things.
我感受到仁波切他的加持呢，是与我们所有的人都同在的。就是当我们现在正在努力的尝试来学习这些教法的时候。
I thank especially the folks at KTD, John, and everyone there at KTD who's supporting this, and also, of course, Lama Sonam, without whom this would be impossible.
我当然了，特别感谢 KTD 的工作人员，包括 John， 还有其他的工作人员，还有 Lama Sonam。没有他们的帮助呢，这是不可能的。
Let's pull together our merit and dedicate that.
让我们把我们所有的这个善业呢，积累起来，一起回向。
Okay, let's see if we can make that happen. Okay, here we go. I'll recite this and you can join in and think that we dedicate all of this to sentient beings everywhere.
我们在诵的时候呢，大家要来思维呢，把所有的这个功德呢回向给所有的众生。
Oja kunin jeran su karma pa, gyao kun trin le chitu karma pa, jiao kun adun so wang kurt karma pa, or gendro du trin le shap ten so. Sonam Dei Tam Che Sit Pani Tom Ne Pedra Nam Pam Jene Ke Na Chi Palap Drupahi Si Pe Sole Troar Shot Jang Chup Sem Ni Rinpoche Ma ke panam ke gyurchik, ke panyam pa me patang, gonne gondu pelwar. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you especially Lama Sonam. She made the beautiful PowerPoints for all of us. Thank you.